chairman of the EGROW Foundation, and I hand it over to him to conduct the series. Dr. Virmani.
Thank you. Thank you, Charan. Of course, I think last week we had a pre-budget presentation, and it'll be interesting for somebody in EGROW to see how many of our suggestions were kind of accepted. I see quite a few, though it may not be only because we suggested, but others also suggested. Anyway, so let me start the thing. As usual, I will be talking on the overall viewpoint, and then, of course, Dr. Bhalla will give his perspective, different perspective, but not always. And then we go into the details by the different speakers. So, we had, if you recall, those of you who attended our earlier discussion, we had talked about a budget for economic growth. And I think now I would call it reforms for economic growth and welfare. And I was just asked on my previous program where I was speaking, what one word you would use. And partly in humor, I said EGROW. So economic growth and welfare budget. Okay, so why do I say that? So let me start with the reforms for growth. Now, generally, my way of judging the budget, I've been involved in, I don't know how many, 20 budgets from inside and outside. And basically, an outstanding budget has at least one big idea. And then with little or no negative factors and a lot of maybe smaller positive things. So what's the big idea here? I think the framework for strategic reform, even though it was approved by the cabinet a couple of months ago and announced as such, I mean, that's all we know. They announced that the cabinet had approved it. We didn't have the details, and the framework was not spelled out in detail. It was called the Strategic Industry Policy, and there were some ideas which were hopeful. But I think it's really, that's the biggest idea, the privatization of the public sector banks, IDBI and two banks, that's really the big idea in this budget. And those of you, as Professor was saying earlier, who are familiar with nationalization, 50 years ago, it's a big change. What are the other reforms? Very quickly, infrastructure, a number of things, the expenditure jump, the PPP in management of infra services. I'm just going to list them to start with and then give a little bit of more detail. And the development finance institution. On banking, we have already mentioned the PSB privatization, but the other two things, the ARC and the asset management company, again, this is a thing which has been going round and round, the solution of the public sector bank NPA problem. We've been discussing endlessly. I think endlessly means like for the last decade or more, how to sort out the issue that finally, I think the bull has been caught by the horns and we are moving forward. So in that sense, I welcome this idea. There is no perfect idea. I said this yesterday, there is no perfect solution. So this ARC, AMC idea, given that public sector banks have these layers of accountability, there really had to be some way to break this and get it going. Other many items in finance, small reform, but I think the single securities code is a good movement. Then FDI and insurance. Again, this is more of a signal, but FDI reform have occurred, over the years. The most recent have been the defense reform, where FDI is already up to 74%. So this was kind of the only remaining major sector which was left, which was still at 49%. So in that sense, it gives a good signal that I would say, except for now minor things, FDI is kind of almost completely liberalized. Then very quickly, I'll mention reforms for welfare. Is Ratan going to be joining? Anyway, we will see. He's probably joining. But public health, and this is an idea we have been pushing, and I'll explain last time also. But the sewage and sanitation, clean water, of course, government already had a scheme. But this what they call Swachh Bharat Urban, which is a focus we had been recommending. The sewage and sanitation system is very important. Other ideas, of course, many people were saying, but just to remind you, I had pointed out to this thing called environmental entropy, which is entropathy, which is responsible for stunting and wasting. Skilling Apprenticeship Act mentioned in the budget. This is this is another idea which we had been proposing for last many years. And of course, then skilling, and then a few other measures on skilling, which is very important to complement employment generation of unskilled. The skilling part is very important for job creation. And education institutions, which is kind of completing the new education policy, Higher Education Commission, the National Science Foundation. Now, just to elaborate a little bit on the big reform, the strategic industry policy, this goes along with, it's not just the banks, of course, but the CPSU's, public sector units, disinvestment roadmap, and the sale of loss-making, the privatization of loss-making units is now clearly on track and is mentioned there. There is also a mention in the budget to incentivize similar actions by the states. I think that's a good new initiative. I haven't looked at the details, but from FM speech, that kind of sale of or disinvestment in state public sector enterprise would obviously be the next step, though it's not under the control of the central government, but I think it's a good signal. And then, of course, related but somewhat different, the underutilized land. So both options have been opened up, whether it's sale or leasing a new SPV company to show that the government is serious. Again, an SPV company is needed to put some distance between the government and the final buyers or leasers of these goods, again, for the same reasons of accountability. It's more important for that, so that there's a clear, transparent mechanism. So again, an old idea which has been sitting around, repeated, people have mentioned, but finally some concrete action on this front. On demand, a lot of issues, people had, in fact, the business people are slightly disappointed because they kept saying demand, but we had focused it very much on infrastructure, even though as a routine matter, many businessmen used to do their own industry and then mention infrastructure, but they seem to be disappointed because there's no industry-specific demand. And I think that is the right approach because this revival of most of the industries is in process. So the only thing which needed a little extra attention, we had pointed this out in our talk earlier, were the contact services, hospitality, etc. There's nothing specific for them also, but that really needed a small amount. Maybe it'll be done later. But the big move is the capital expenditure, 34.5% increase, BE on BE. So because everybody had said this, and we were among those, that private capacity utilization is low, private investment is going to take some time to revive, maybe a year, maybe a little longer. And so the government has to step up capital expenditure, otherwise the whole investment sector is going to suffer. So complementary, and also it is necessary for the construction incentive infrastructure like highways is not only necessary to create demand for steel, etc., but also employment. Just incidentally, I mentioned two other points here. The auto scrapping policy, I was afraid they would make it compulsory, and it's a wrong time to make it compulsory. They've kept it voluntary. So that's good that it's voluntary. And the second one, the CSS rationalization, which one has been talking about for a long time, but apparently the Finance Commission, 15th Finance Commission also recommended it, and they are finally going to do something about it. I think that expenditure rationalization will free up, will allow reallocation of expenditure to things which are more needed. The next element, and very significant, I would say this is in terms of involving and getting private investment into infra management. They put it under the policy of monetization of assets, but I think more important aspect is to bring private management expertise into the process. So the whole list and very detailed, both in highways, electricity transmission, railways, airport, gas pipelines, major port services, urban infrastructure and sports, for example, sports stadia I mentioned. So clearly a lot of thought has been given to transfer assets in a PPP mode to private sector who can run it more efficiently. I mean, those of you who live in Delhi know that Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium is barely used like once, 2 or 3 times a year. So things like that, underutilized, inefficiently managed infrastructure assets in all these areas would now involve private, participation through PPP. Then there were financial sector reforms. I mentioned the single financial code, but there are other things related to deposit insurance, NBFCs. Maybe Dr. Charan Singh may pick out the ones which are more interesting. And finally, before I give my little disappointment where our recommendation was not adopted, the public health. And I don't know, is Dr. Ratan going to join us, or should I say more? Will he be here? Yeah, okay. So I'll just very briefly highlight the part which I have been very strongly advocating, which is the Swachh Bharat Urban Mission. I think it's a great thing dealing with liquid waste. We are very squeamish people. We don't talk about. I still remember when Prime Minister declared the Swachh Bharat Mission for toilets from ramparts of Red Fort in 2014. I was probably the first economist to welcome it. And so I must acknowledge that this liquid waste management, fecal sludge, to mention these words, people are so squeamish, they shrink from this. I don't. Because why? Bioremediation of garbage dumps. See, every year there are huge garbage dumps. I have for at least a decade or more been talking about end-to-end solutions to waste management. So I think it's a good start. They put it in the form of a Swachh Bharat urban mission. And some people are complaining there's not enough money in it. But, the money will come. The idea is this is really a state subject. So the center has to give the vision, and, people don't think of vision in the context of fecal matter. But it's necessary. Why? Because of this problem called environmental enteropathy, which is the important cause of stunting and wasting. And you will see the results of this 5 to 10 years from now. First on wasting, then on stunting, of how important this is. That's why I'm taking more time than usual, because it's a critical thing. The other things probably the connected with the details of the health, then I'll leave it for Dr. Ratan to talk about. But we are always asked, okay, you liked all these things, what didn't you like? Well, there was nothing specifically I didn't like, but I hope that in the next next 15 months, 2 or 3 of the things which we had also proposed, which have not been adopted, which I had mentioned both in the FM meeting and the PM meeting, have not been adopted. These are tax reform, the direct tax code reform, which has not been mentioned at all. FM has, of course, mentioned GST, but that, of course, will have to be taken up with the GST Council. But interestingly, she has also mentioned, given a suggestion of customs duty reform by giving 2 lines on exemptions. So she mentioned certain number of exemptions which have been abolished, and 100 or more exemptions which remain, which need to be reviewed. That is part of customs duty reform. So it gives me hope that this will be done in the next financial year. And the second aspect is welfare reform, where I think the focus because of the pandemic has been more on the health part of it, but that's well deserved. But we had also proposed reform of the poverty alleviation system. Again, I'm hopeful that we'll hear more of it, let's say in the next 9 months or so, but definitely during the calendar year. So let me end with that. This overall approach, which I think is very right, that instead of focusing on the fiscal deficit for the current year and the next year, the focus seems to have been, and one is very happy with that focus on the growth. What does growth require? Efficient expenditure, efficient policy, reforms, etc. And the fiscal will take care of itself. And I'm sure Dr. Bhalla has quite strong views on that. He may want to say more on that, but I leave it to him to pick up. He's very good at picking up the important issues. So with that, Sujit, over to you.
Thank you, Arvind, and good morning and good evening. I've come here more to listen because you guys have had a longer time to digest the budget. I did wake up in the middle of the night to follow it somewhat. And, I must say that like you, Arvind, and I think like most of the rest, it is a very, very impressive budget. And I'll list 2 or 3 simple reasons why it is. Let's first take on the direct tax code, which you have been arguing strenuously for I don't know how many years, and so have I. I think this budget lays the base for, so here's a prediction, it lays the base for a direct tax code adoption next year. So I think that's very much on the cards, or reading between the lines. Second, on the fiscal deficit, we finally junked it as an indicator or as a policy measure. It will come as it will come. So in that sense, it's very, very welcome. I noticed that the nominal GDP growth for next year, 21-22, is somewhere around 15%. Let me just also make another forecast, which is relevant for the growth and for the budget next year, is that 15% will be considerably lower than the actual nominal income growth this year. And I think the government has been favorably impressed and surprised by what is happening to GST. This is in spite of, for the most part, there having been a lockdown. And I think it does suggest an overhaul next year. There is also, the Finance Commission apparently has tabled a report, their report, and I haven't yet got my hands on it, but it would be very interesting to see. Remember the 5 years of the cess or the compensation to the states, guaranteed compensation to the states on the basis of 14% growth in taxes, comes to an end next year, which may have been another reason why the direct tax code wasn't taken up this year, because obviously it's related to tax revenues and what is happening on the indirect tax side. It's likely that the cess, the guaranteed income share of 14% will be achieved in this fiscal year itself without having recourse or much to compensation from the central budget. The infrastructure is very, very welcome. And I think across the board, whether it is human capital, physical capital, the administration or the government is finally really looking at the essentials, which is very, very welcome. Last 2 points, I thought, which is again the beginning of the end of the public sector banks. That's not to say that I think we will end up with one or two public sector banks forever, which is fantastic. State Bank of India being one of them, but I'll wait to hear what others have to say. But I think the bank nationalization, which started in 1969, is beginning to come to an end. And the auctioning or selling of government land, another major breakthrough. So, I think in totality, there is a vision in this budget, which has been lacking in many budgets, and that along with the agricultural laws, we're finally going to get a modern India economy and a modern India budget and a modern India financing of the budget. So I'm looking forward to what others have to say because I want to learn as to what actually happened in the budget. Thank you very much.
Dr. Vimani sir, we can't hear you. You're mute, probably you're mute.
Okay, thank you, Surjit. I guess some of us were listening to the speech from 11 to 1 o'clock, but you had to sleep. It was middle of night for you. So our next speaker is Ashok Vishandas. I guess he'll focus on his subject of agriculture, though of course you're welcome to make brief points on other issues if you quickly want to do that also. So Ashok.
Yes, thank you, Arvindji. As he said, I will focus mostly on agriculture, and this budget according to me, it covers a lot of grounds on agriculture, offers a lot to the farmers and the rural agriculture household. There are many good things, but one or two are not so good. So first, let me concentrate on the positive things. Now, the budget talks about the Operation Green Scheme, which covers the top agriculture commodity. Here, top means the tomato, onion, potato. So this perishable commodity will include 22 more commodities which are perishable, whose shelf life is very short, and then it will be export oriented. So our agriculture export will get a boost, and that will have a direct impact on the overall agriculture growth and therefore the economy's growth. So I find this is very good. Second, the agriculture credit, which is very, very critical, and that besides land and labor, this agriculture credit assumes a lot of importance. The government has in the budget, they have promised 1.65 lakh crores, 16.50 lakhs crore compared to so this is about 10 to 15% higher than the previous one, and that will boost the agriculture growth. Again, the micro irrigation fund with a corpus of 5,000 crore has been allocated to the NABARD, and it will further get a boost. The allocation to rural infrastructure development fund has increased from rupees 30,000 crore to 40,000 crore. This is another plus in the agriculture, which is likely to propel the growth of the agriculture. And one more thing, which is the Honorable Prime Minister, this Swam Vidya scheme, under this a record of rights is being given to property owners in villages. This is very good because that will increase the dignity of the farmers. And let me also add, the agriculture and allied sector will expand Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan Maha Abhiyan scheme to help 20 lakh farmers in setting the solar pumps that will stand alone, that will give a boost to the energy, and the viability gap funding will be provided for setting up warehousing at the block level. So this is a kind of micromanagement. Also on the fishery sector, 5 new harbor are also being developed in Cochin, Tamil Nadu, and one in Vishakhapatnam, Paradip. So those will provide a lot of growth to the fishery sector. Likewise, the seafood in park is being established in Tamil Nadu that will provide lot of impetus to the farmer and farming community at the coastal area. So these things are going to, and ENAM is also being expanded to cover 1,000 more mandis. So there will be a lot of integration and all these budget steps, and the WDRA, the Warehousing Development Receipt Authority, that she has said that it will be strengthened, that will again give farmers a lot of strength in calibrating the offloading of their production. Up to now, what was happening, whatever they produce, they used to offload in the mandis, thereby the prices get dipped and the farmers do not get much of what they produce. Now it will enable the farmers to judiciously calibrate their offloading in a calibrated manner. Therefore, the price realization is expected to be much higher, and therefore the farmer's income is likely to increase. So these are some of the very important steps. I really like it, and I'm sure this will help in making the doubling of the farmer's income target much easier compared to what was. So these are the positive steps. Now, coming back, is somewhat not very good step is regarding the MSP. Now, government is giving a lot of emphasis on rice wheat procurement. It says with pride they have increased the, for instance, in the wheat, the figures are 33,874 crores were worth of wheat was procured in 2013-14. That is the figure she compared to what is being given in 2021 is 75,000 crore. Now, at one level, it looks very impressive, but on the other hand, our granaries are overflowing with rice and wheat. And if you overemphasize on this, because we don't need, the production has to be synced with the demand. Now, if there is not much demand, what is the point of producing those things? Likewise, rice production and the amount of MSP operation increase from 63,000 crore in 2013, which has more than almost tripled in 2021, 1,72,752 crores. I mean, this is a massive amount for MSP, and one has to remember this paddy is a water guzzling crop. On one hand, we are running short of water. On the other hand, you are indirectly nudging the farmers to produce more. I think this is a self-contradictory, and the country not going to benefit out of it. In any case, and on top of it, the government is encouraging the conversion of rice and paddy into the ethanol blending. 10% now, and by 2030 they say 20%. Now this is really not going to help the nation, because it's a short term, and I wish it would have been avoided, because we have to diversify to the commodity which we are in short supply. For example, edible oils. Now edible oils we are importing as much as we produce domestically. So we produce almost 50% of our domestic demand. Therefore, we import edible oils as much as we produce domestically. So there is no emphasis on oilseed production domestically. Palm oil is a case in point where it is feasible to increase the production provided certain conditions are met, and government needs to handhold the farmers and it can be grown in oilseed. There is a report by by myself and Ashok Gulati on this. So this report, I mean, this is just an illustration, and it is a feasible report has been done. So, but nothing has been said on giving the impetus to the oilseed production. Basically, if budget, your production system should be in sync with the demand. We do not produce just for the sake of producing anything. So the commodity which are sellable in the market and will fetch obviously the good prices, and there should be some emphasis on this aspect. Government is somehow has escaped the attention of this, but barring this thing, budget is very good. It is going to overall boost the agri economy of the country, and I'm sure it will help in attaining the doubling of the farmer income in next few years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Vishnudas. So, yeah, I would just, I think you highlighted all the positives and given your views on, I agree with your views on the MSP, but the way I read the budget was that they just put the information out there. I'm not sure, I mean, whether they were trying to justify and promote, maybe they were, but I think just having the data so people can discuss, and as you have quite rightly done, correlate that we are spending so much money on MSP and accumulating useless stocks of wheat, especially, and rice to a certain extent. That I think is very important, which you should certainly keep pointing out for the public education. Thank you. Okay, so is Ratan, Mr. Ratan Chand is there?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, okay. Why can't we see you? There you are. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Speaking from Mount Abu.
Okay.
We just reached out. Okay, there are, as you know, 6 pillars of Atam, and one of the pillars is the health and well-being. In the health, there are 3 important areas. One is preventive services, curative services, and health well-being. So all these areas, the government has, the budget has tried to address all these areas. The thing is, the important program of National Health Mission will continue as it is. One more scheme that's quite big scheme has Atmanirbhar Swasth of 680 crores. This 64,180 crores is spent in 6 years. The main purpose of this scheme is to capacity of primary and tertiary institutions, strengthen the existing institutions, national institutions, and create for detection and cure of new and emerging diseases. Main interventions under this scheme: sport for around 8 laboratories and 3,082 blocks of the country, and also strengthen the National Center for Disease Control and its 5 research and surveillance units in 20 metropolitan cities with a population of 10 lakh or above. The scheme also includes establishing critical care hospitals in 602 districts and 12 centers and 12 central institutions. And also integration of health information portal with the public health laboratories. Further operationalization of 32 new public health units at airports, seaports, and land ports. So these were some of the schemes, some of the activities or minor schemes under the main scheme which was announced today. Next important thing is that government has taken care of this nutrition, water, sanitation, etc., and safe drinking water. So, for under nutrition, the scheme, the supplementary nutrition scheme has been merged with Poshan Abhiyan, and a new mission called Mission Poshan will be launched. So, under this mission, nutrition activities will be taken in the country, especially in the aspirational districts, which are 112 in numbers. And three important social determinants are water supply, Swachh Bharat, Swasth Bharat, and clean air. Clean air. Under water supply, Jal Jeevan Mission in the urban areas will cover 4,378 local bodies, and in these local bodies, liquid waste management and also the sewerage treatment, etc., will be undertaken. So total amount is a big amount, 2,87,000 crores in 5 years. So this is quite a big amount to be spent for Jal Jeevan and liquid waste management and sewerage treatment. Another component also Swachh Bharat, Swasth Bharat. Under this also, in the remaining municipalities, sewerage treatment, solid waste management, plastic use reduction, managing construction waste, dumping sites, etc., all will be taken care of. So under this scheme, again, huge amount has been kept for the next 5 years. Amount is 1,41,678 crores. And another component is also clean air. So under this clean air, 2,217 road has been kept for 42 urban centers with a population million plus. The government also proposed to launch a policy for scrapping 20 years mosquitoes and years rupees 35,000 crores has been kept. So if we see all these schemes taken together in 2021, 94,000 crores was the outlay, which has now been increased to 2,23,846 crores. So it's an increase of say 137%. Also, one of the related component is the Ujola scheme, under which poor women were given these LPG cylinders. So this scheme will continue, and 1 crore more families will be covered under this scheme. In addition to that, one National Nursing and Midwifery Commission will also be formed. It has been announced in the budget, and this has also been announced. So 30 and interesting thing is that 30% increase in the has been given to Ayush, that is Ayurvedic, Unani, Siddha, homeopathy, this system of medicine. So what I feel, I hope all the existing schemes will continue, which includes this strengthening of health and wellness centers, then this Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, then these dispensaries national at the district level, Aushadhi Kendra, all those will continue. And I feel now this stress on clean water, cleanliness, and on Ayush activities, and maybe also on the health education, more prevention activities will be undertaken, and people are likely to fall less sick compared to the present situation. With so much of I think new institutions, with existing centers, if their governance is improved, I think out-of-pocket expenditure of the general public will also be reduced. And from keeping all these things in view, I feel this is a good budget from health point of view. Of course, so much money has been given, has to be judiciously spent, so that proper benefit can be derived from the budget from the money to be provided under this budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ujola. It looks like a multi-dimensional and comprehensive program. There's one clarification, one thing I missed, I wasn't sure. You mentioned prevention. Is there anything on health education mentioned in the budget? I didn't notice it.
Not specifically in the speech, but maybe there when we see the detailed activities.
Okay, right, yeah. Because prevention, one of the basic elements is health education. Yeah, hopefully they'll have it. Okay, thank you. Let us move on to Dr. Mohinder Pal Singh, and he's going to tell us about the defense budget and how it met his recommendations, which he made a few days ago.
Thank you very much, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Sir, thank you very much. And I was really very happy to see that a lot of things have moved as per recommendations, and especially to mention that one of our major recommendations was that the capital outlay as part of the defense budget must go up. And I would like to share with the House that there has been a fantastic change, rather a total U-turn, and the first time in 15 years that the capital expenditure has increased vis-a-vis the revenue expenditure by 19%. It has gone up. Though the overall increase in the defense outlay has been approximately 7.3%, but the capital expenditure, as we were recommending, has gone up by 18%. It also changes the equation because of last 10 years continuously. The capital expenditure ratio of capital is to revenue. The capital was decreasing, capital expenditure, and the capital expenditure is one which goes for new acquisitions for defense forces. And keeping the geopolitical situation in mind, we had recommended that we need to go in for a major series of purchases, which is already we are aware it is happening. So this additional increase from 1.13 lakh crores in the previous budget to 1.35 lakh crores in this budget is a welcome move. And I'm sure it will see us buying or manufacturing a lot of equipments which are needed at our borders now. It also highlighted that last year's in the budget, 20,000 crores were additionally allocated at the RE stage, and that has gone basically to go in for emergency purchases in terms of equipment and weapons which are required. At that time, we are all aware especially on the Chinese front borders. So overall, this was a welcome change considering the fiscal environment that this increase of defense budget has taken place, and especially in terms of capital expenditure. Now, if we actually see, if we remove the pensions, the increase from 3.3 lakh crores from the previous year to 3.62 lakh crores is a reasonably good increase as far as defense spendings are concerned, keeping the priority of other sectors in mind. So overall, I feel this is going to give a push to the new acquisitions, new required weapons and platforms required for the armed forces in all the three armies. And on the sidelines, there was one more very good news, that 100 new SANI schools they have proposed, though it has come under the education one, but now we all are aware about the deficiency of officers, which is there in the officer cadre in the armed forces, almost up to the tune of around 8,000, with a sanctioned strength of 53,000 officers. There is about 8,000 deficient, and I'm sure in the coming time, the SANI schools are the breeding grounds for joining NDA and other services. So 100 additional SANI schools would really contribute a lot towards making up for the deficiency in the coming time. So overall, I am very satisfied to see this change and the allocations for defense services. That's it, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then now I guess the last speaker is Dr. Charan Singh. Charan?
Yeah, I think I like the budget a lot. First and foremost, I must mention I have seen the government confidently saying that the gross fiscal deficit is 9.5% of GDP. And we are not going to get into the consolidation phase till 25-26, when we'll try to get under 4%. And the next year, the deficit is going to be 6.5%, 6.8%. And I thought that confidence with which they came out and very transparently saying what the deficit figures are, that should be the way. The rating agencies and the whole world knows what we are passing through. We have a young demographic country and people much below the poverty line and unemployed, and they have to be taken care. So this is something which I liked. On the lighter side, somebody asked the FM in the press conference that yesterday the economic survey said we are expecting a growth of 11%. The IMF said 11.5%, but you have assumed nominal growth of only 14.4%. And the FM, very in a lighter mood, said, this is get done by two different departments, one the conservative ministry and the other flamboyant economic advisor. Yes, there is something one needs to be really looking at. The other thing, which I think is very good, the finance minister spoke about the proposals, saying this would be done in 3 years, this would be done in 5 years. As I always say, the fiscal policy is here with an objective and an aim. If the aim is a $5 trillion economy or a $10 trillion economy over a period of time, the annual budget is simply a cog in the wheel, and it has to fit in how does we achieve that dream. So I think the medium-term plan, a 3-year or a 5-year horizon for most of the schemes, I thought was very well done. We have lived through the time of VP Singh when we did have a long-term fiscal policy. I would treat it as a medium-term fiscal policy, and I thought that was very good. As Dr. Ratan Chand said, the whole budget had been organized around the 6 pillars, and each of these pillars, when I was thinking, what are they really aiming at? As I mentioned yesterday, I always look at output as a contribution from labor and capital. And I think the budget has spoken to each of those components. It has spoken about health, how to take care of its people, the labor. It has spoken about the financial sector, capital, infrastructure, how to either provide employment or how to take care of the capital and ensure the cleanliness of that capital or the robustness of that capital. Now, I want to just bring in two things to your notice. The tax buoyancy is expected around 1.6%. And why I mention that is obviously the question is if the tax collections are not going to be very high and the expenditure pattern continues, and the government has announced plethora of schemes, as Dr. Ashok and Dr. Ratan mentioned, where is the money going to come from? So I would, when I looked at the figures, most of the money is going to come from market borrowings, obviously, which gets reflected in the gross fiscal deficit. The disinvestment figure is pretty large, around 1,75,000, which is pretty large, whereas the recovery last year under the disinvestment is just around 32,000. But if you go back in 1920, it was 50,000. So it's little more ambitious. The money is going to come from better GST collection, tax buoyancy, and much better tax compliance is what they're looking for. And if I look at the budgeted figures, some money is going to come from the corporation tax and somebody is going to come from the taxes on income. And certainly GST improvement is there. I noticed one thing, and I'm just sharing with the House, the pension amount in 2021 is 2,04,393 crore. But for the current year, 21-22, from next year, is shown as 1,89,328 crore. Now that was a little worry. Are they cleaning up the pension system? Are there any bogey pensioners? What is it? Or why should the pension amount be coming down? I wasn't very sure. I'm sure the mortality rate is not that high that would reflect in the pension. One thing good which I noticed is the expenditure on Manrega. The expenditure on Manrega budgeted for 2021 was just 61,500, and we all know about the reverse migration that took place. And therefore, the data right now is 1,11,500 crore for the same 2021 period under Manrega. And for the next year, it is budgeted at 73,000 crore. So I thought that was one anomaly that I noticed, but on Manrega, I thought it's very well budgeted. In the press conference, I think it was asked if the revenue estimates are accurate or there is some problem, and it was mentioned they are rather conservative, and we are certainly going to meet the revenue collection. I am also thinking if the economy is buoyant, the GST, corporation tax, income tax, they should do well, and therefore I think that's right. Now, I want to just bring to your notice a few points that are dear to me and also close to the areas that I work in. And I thought those were very good points. The banking sector and economists in the country have been saying that the commercial banks may not be adept at or may not be comfortable in doing the cash flow of large infrastructure projects. Moreover, the non-performing assets have generally fallen in that category. A commercial banker may be good at assessing what to lend to a car or a house, but to lend to a road or to lend to a port and how to assess its commercial viability and take care of all the risks, probably they're not. So the government has very correctly announced a development financial institution. I think that's in the right spirit, they've heard, and that is why you found today in the stock market, the banking shares were doing so well. The government has also spoken about developing the debt market and how they want to go about, and I thought that was also very good. And they have also said that for the non-performing assets and cleaning the balance sheet of the commercial banks, and I totally agree, one cannot blame the commercial banks just because there are rising NPAs here. It is the economy that is reflected in the balance sheet of the commercial bank, and the economy is not doing well. The balance sheet of the commercial banks cannot be doing well. Exactly that replication and reflection is there. It's a mirror image of the economy. And that is why the government has announced a bad bank. They haven't used the word bad bank. They've called it as the asset reconstruction and the asset management company, which is fair enough. And they're going to work out the details. I thought that was a very good idea. On the power sector, and because it gets impacted on the balance sheets, they are thinking of some improvements in discom. The fintech, and that's my other worry, the non-banking finance companies in the country, there are quite a few, 10,000 of them. How many of them are ready to adopt fintech? And once fintech takes over, how many of them will be able to survive? That's my worry all the time. And the government has announced a fintech hub, which I think is a very good idea that they have done. In general, the support that they've given to the startups, the help that they have done to the senior citizens above 75 years of age, saying that they need not fill in the form, that I know how much of tension it causes, and the thought, the way they've gone about announcing the textile parks, the infrastructure projects, the road projects, affordable housing, the railways, I think they have taken care of the employment too. So given this situation where they've taken care of the human capital as well as the financial capital and taking care of the labor through health policies and through agriculture that was just mentioned, looking at the complete picture of the budget, I thought it's a path-breaking budget. And I am not shy of saying that after the 1991 budget that was path-breaking, this probably in the history of budget making will be an outstanding path-breaking budget. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. I have just turned my attention to the questions. Just seeing, is there anything? Sharon, do you see any? Anybody? We'll take a few questions. I think
I see a couple of questions there. If you permit, we can tell them to ask their question themselves. There are questions by B. Gopal Singh, Dr. Gopal Singh, and there is a question by Professor Pabitra Jena. They can ask the question themselves.
Yeah. In that, it's fine. Yeah.
Please be brief so that you take care of the time.
Right. Go ahead.
Sir.
So I think Dr. Gopal Singh is going first. I don't see him. There you are.
Yeah. For the purpose of exemption from income tax return submission, they have considered senior citizens above 70 years, but it should have been 65 years and above, number one. Number two, 9.5 fiscal deficit may pose problem of inflation in the next 2 to 3 years. How much can be maximum limit for fiscal deficit in the current situation? Apart from that, farm cess of 2% on liquors is a misnomer, as it is not spent for the farm activities or for the benefit of the farmers. Thank you, sir.
Well, we will be discussing monetary policy tomorrow, but you know, this 9.5 is over. The inflation is already going down, and as we had been pointing out in EGROW, that it was mostly due to seasonal agricultural commodities. As soon as the agro prices have gone down, the inflation has receded. So the year which is about to end, I don't see any issue there, and so that is one. I don't think it's going to have any influence on I think, given that the private capacity utilization is very low, everybody is agreed that private investment is not going to recover. All the businesses have been talking about injecting more demand rather than worrying about excess of demand over capacity. So I really don't see any forces that anybody has mentioned which would lead us to conclude that there would be any inflation pressure from those items. Agriculture, do you want to, was there a question for Professor?
Yes, doctor. Yes, doctor. This is Subramanian.
Yeah.
Visham Das ji rightfully said that there is unutilized stocks of rice and wheat. In the background of that, how do you achieve the feeling of doubling of the farmer's income? I have my own doubt about the efficiency unless until cropping pattern is efficiently managed, advised, and then utilized accordingly in the ground. Is it possible for this country to achieve from the existing bureaucracy? I am my own doubt. And then doubling of the farm income, how it comes, I am not able to understand. Kindly explain.
Yeah, Professor Subramaniam, uh, this is a lacuna that we are emphasizing on rice and wheat in some way, but there are many other steps in this budget which will propel the farmers' income to a much higher level. For example, providing the credit, agriculture credit, 16.5 lakh crore. That's a massive amount. Then providing the fishing harbors, developing and seafood cultivation, and all those things, and then providing kisan credit card to all those who are beneficiary under the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. So they are marginal and small farmer. They are being given the KCC, that is Kisan Credit Card, and host of other factor. And there is a implicit indication in the budget speech that there will be some kind of stability in the agri export trade policy. And there are many people, there are a few studies which shows out of 100 million tons of total production, just an example, only 55% get monetized in the market. That means 45% goes waste. Now, there is an emphasis on cold storage, WDRA, Warehousing Development Regulatory Authority, and they are going to build the warehouse at block level. That's a massive kind of infrastructure creation. So I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever in my mind the farmers' income will increase definitely. The question may be 1 or 2 years here or there, but we are on the right path. Only the question of velocity and speed of increasing. But this will definitely is bound to increase, and then it's double, maybe not by 2024, maybe 2026, but this is going to happen. But these are the small hiccups. See, we have to understand in a democracy, you can't do away a U-turn. Now, MSP has been in operation for last 55 years, right from 65, more than 50. And then suddenly nobody can stop this wheat and rice. It's very difficult. So in a way, we have to deal with this in its own way. But other steps which are being taken and have been announced in the budget, they are very, very positive. As my colleague Charan Singh has said, it's a path-breaking budget. And agriculture is not exception. And you see, they started with the agriculture, which is very, very rare that in the budget you start with agriculture. So I am absolutely hopeful, and it's a realistic optimism that farmers' income will double.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. One second, sir. I have been working with Dr. M.L. Swaminathan for some time after my retirement from the Reserve Bank, because I was working in the World Bank Agriculture Project and ARDC projects for a very long time. And then Swaminathan had suggested about the integrated farming development. Perhaps that will have to be brought in very efficiently to improve the income, farm income around the year, utilization of the farm labor, and then the utilization of the production factors. I feel that may be necessary. It requires a lot of advisory role from government, and then government needs extension services that they will have to improve. I don't know how much will be allocated in budget for that purpose. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Subramaniam, I just want to add one thing. What farmers need just two things: getting the prices right and getting the markets right. If these two things are set in place rightfully, then I think everything will fall in place. and in the right place. So government is implicitly trying to get the markets right and getting the prices right. And when these things are ensured, that also implies that all the commodity from all corners of the country, from all geographies, get integrated with the market. That means nothing remains unsold. And that is possible because you sync your production with the demand, keeping due regard to the demand, and then calibrate your production accordingly. And once it is done, I think it's not very, very difficult to double the farmers' income.
Okay, thank you. Charan, unless you've seen any other question, I'm going to close it, but I don't see.
Yes.
Okay.
Sir, I have one question. Yeah, question. I want to come in.
To ask a question.
Sorry, Mr. Anand is there. Who else?
Yes.
Pavitra want to ask a question, sir. Yeah.
I'm there.
Mr. Anand and then Pavitra.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, when I see the budget and as the experts here all have appreciated, and there is a very much positivity in the economy after the budget. But when I come to the applied side, particular to the financial sector, and take the financial stability report of Reserve Bank of India into view, that there are the scenarios of rising NPAs because the cash flows with the borrowers are low, one. Second is that due to pandemic, we went for stoppage from slippages from standard category to NPA, and still Supreme Court has stayed that in September. So our time clock of counting NPA is stopped. The moment we start this time clock and reckon the NPAs, the alternatives suggested in the budget are going to take long time in setting up the DFI or ARC or AMC. But right now, if we look towards the bank and compare this 20,000 rupees capitalization for the bank, I think this is not going to be sufficient for making the minimum capital adequacy required. If this is met, then secondly, we get caught up that we lack the capital for growth, which need is there for the banks to allow the fresh credit to happen. So this is one timeline. I think in the short run, when we look at March 21, and when we reach there, banking is going to face a challenge of the short term. Although this budget suggests the long term, things to happen, and the execution of that is to be very well done in setting up the DFI and the AMC, etc. So I think there is a dilemma here, and banking sector needs to be taken care more in terms of the, very less parties going and opting for restructuring. I think there will be a more requirement of capital for the banks. So that is the observation.
Okay, thank you. We'll take three questions together. There are two more, Mr. Jaina and then Mr. Ram, and then I'll let Charan and whoever else wants to come in. Mr. Jaina?
Yes. Yeah, even if that budget is very good budget, but one thing is that I'm just wondering about that inequality. That recently that Oxfam International has given report, that also what the paper that Thomas Piketty has published in 2014, that inequality in India is continuously increasing. That 10% of people are holding 70%, 74% of the wealth. So in that budget, what have been done that to reduce that inequality in that reduce the inequality? And another major problem that on employment issues also, that how it can be tackled, because last 20 years that employment government is not releasing the data. These are two major problems apart from that NPA issues. So how that inequality can reduce? Otherwise, in the future, it is going to have a huge impact on Indian economy.
Okay, Mr. Ram.
Yeah, I just have one observation, then I have a query. The observation is that, I'm happy at last after 7 years, this government gathered the guts, to talk about privatizing PSB. And I think they have left that in a kind of an ambiguous fashion, because On the one hand, they talk about privatizing two PSBs. And if I look at the disinvestment target, I'm talking about the amount, it's 1.7, I mean, 1.70 kind of lakhs, okay? So I do not know, okay, first and foremost, what kind of privatization they have in mind, which are the candidate banks, and the track record of this government when it comes to making grand statements and performance. The gap is very huge. Gross budget that we talked about, 2.13 lakh disinvestment, and we know where we stand. In fact, not just last budget, last 6 budgets, except once, we never met the target. Okay, that is, I mean, my observation. And of course, thank God, I mean, they have gathered the guts. And I have a query. I was surprised the government, our budget, did not talk anything about MPC, because the MPC framework is due for review this year, because it is supposed to be reviewed every 5 years, and we started in 2016. And I was expecting some kind of a review mechanism or some statement about the, I mean, MPC review, but that was not coming in. And just given the kind of fiscal deficit and everything, are we as a government now deciding, I mean, inflation is no more the focus area for this government?
Sharon, do you want to take up whatever questions?
Yeah. Good. You know, Professor Ram, I totally agree with you. But tomorrow we are having the shadow monetary policy from 4 to 5:30. Maybe you could ask that question then. But as far as the government is concerned, I'm sure it has a 5-year tenure. The concept of MPC, it'll come. I'm sure the reviews will be undertaken. And by the time the April monetary policy is announced, the annual monetary policy, they may have something to announce. That's what I would look at. I totally agree with the question which Mr. Gopal raised on the fiscal deficit. How sustainable is a 9.5% deficit to GDP ratio? Now, yesterday there was a heavy discussion on this, much more than me. Dr. Surjit Bhalla has mentioned many times, and I have also started talking based on empirical evidence that I could look at. Where is the relationship between gross fiscal deficit and inflation? Now, all of us were brought up in an economic environment with the theory that when the gross fiscal deficit goes up, it will eventually end up in inflation. But 2008 crisis happened, and all the countries' deficit and debt ratios zoomed up. They are struggling to get some inflation in their country. So therefore, and Japan is a classic example. 3 decades have gone by, they're struggling to get some inflation in the country. So the point that I'm trying to make at this point of time, what is required is the revival of the economy. And the priority is growth and employment. And therefore, I think the government has done the right thing. Now, if you go by the survey, economic survey, where the chief economic advisor says that the sustainability is simply R minus G, or yesterday, as Dr. Virmani was explaining, the primary deficit plays a role. And if you look at the sustainability equation, which I was referring to, Domer equation since 1944 in the American Economic Review, it clearly says that if your growth is higher than the deficit, than the interest rate, it's sustainable. And I hold on to that view for the simple reason that if your investment is good, and the FM mentioned today that the capital expenditure is rising and is on the trajectory. I'm not compromising on the capital expenditure. And the growth is expected, I myself said 14.4% is the nominal growth. Interest rates are sagging. So I think one need not worry too much with the so-called quote unquote Western concept or Maastricht Treaty concept of 3% sacrosanct. Nobody is advocating profligacy or fiscal irresponsibility, but all one is saying is if it is necessary, one should not be shy of incurring a deficit. With that's all that I wanted to submit, and back to the chairman in case he wants to have any concluding observations, or if Dr. Bhalla wants to mention something. I leave it to the chairman.
Sujit, is he still there? Dr. Bhalla? No,
Yeah,
he's not here, Chairman. He must have left.
No,
So,
I'm here. I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You want to say something?
No, same thing on the fiscal deficit. I think, we have to applaud the government for having um, taken this step and not giving it the prominence that previous governments have given. Also, it was mentioned about the Monetary Policy Committee, the framework on inflation targeting. That is up for review, but not till April. We'll find out the results on that. I'm working on the MPC review, and let us see what results one obtains. But I think what we have to emphasize and appreciate is that this is a modern budget. Privatization is no longer a four-letter word. When was the last time Indian government document mentioned privatization as a major focus of policy? So, I think, what Arvind, you've been arguing for a long time. I've been arguing on the direct taxes. We need reform on direct taxes. And I think this year it was too much to expect given what has happened on COVID. And I expect that this budget and the subsequent recovery that will emerge will set the stage up for really reforming the direct taxes. We will also, I haven't yet been able to get hold of the Finance Commission report, but I think it'd be very interesting to look at what they say in terms of the allocation to the states and the center of revenues. And as we know, we have gone through the last 5 years when inflation really has fallen, and the government was committed to a 14% guarantee to the states, annual increase in tax revenue. I think that will also sort itself out by the end of 21-22, such that we may be in for a new equation on both the indirect taxes vis-a-vis GST, as well as a direct tax code, which will, given privatization, given the thrust on infrastructure, given the beginning of labor reforms, given reforms, and the finance minister had said that this is the dawn of a new era, and I think she's absolutely right.
Thank you. So let me just conclude that I think majority of our comments of our commentators today is positive on the budget. Of course, we don't do what TV does. We're not asking for number ranking and grading, but I would say it's a pretty good budget overall, because and we need to point that out if it because Mrs. Sitharaman as the first real finance minister. Indira Gandhi as PM acted as finance minister, but she is the first female finance minister, and I would say she's done a very good job in this budget. So I would just conclude with that as my final statement, and thank you all for joining. Thank you.
I would simply make two announcements. Tomorrow we are doing the shadow monetary policy from 4 to 5:30. I'm requesting everybody to please join. I'll send the flyer also. And secondly, on February 5, we are having experts discuss the budget at length. So we are 6 experts will be discussing the budget at length. Enough time would be there between today and February 5, so you can expect a far more analytical assessment of the budget. And the timing is 5:30 to 7 on Friday, our traditional time. to discuss the union budget. Once again, I thank the panelists and I thank the participants for sparing time and listening and participating in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.